Well, welcome to our second Dante walkthrough in both English and Italian. I've had some useful feedback in relation to the first walkthrough of Canto 26, and while many just prefer listening to the audio, I'll continue with the video portion and showing the text in both Italian and English, but probably with fewer pictures. As I've said before, and as ever, this is my own translation as best I can interpret the Italian. Having done the Ulysses canto as a trial, we'll go to the very start of the Commedia, l'inizio, the very beginning, to Inferno number 1, and walk our way through that canto. It's an unusual and in many ways a unique canto, as it's the only one where Dante is still in the real world. For the remaining 99 cantos, he's in one of the three realms of the beyond, al di là, over there, Inferno, Purgatorio, or the Paradiso. It's quite staggering how much commentary has been written on this canto, not just because of its own content specific to the canto, but probably by way of introducing the whole concept of the Commedia, the linkages with other philosophers, Christian theology, etc., and thinking in the Middle Ages, medieval period. It's also important as we meet Virgil for the first time, and he'll be Dante's guide and companion for the next 2/3 of the journey. Virgil will indeed make an extraordinary promise to Dante that if he's willing and courageous enough, he will see the three worlds beyond. Commentaries started to be written on the Commedia and on the Inferno as early as 1322, and the case of Jacopo Alighieri, which is Dante's son. Boccaccio, famous for his writing of the Decameron, also wrote a commentary on the first half of the Inferno in 1373. And we've got commentaries all the way up to and beyond people like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in the USA, who wrote a commentary in 1867. In fact, if you want to delve deeper into explanations of the text, Dartmouth University in the USA has an excellent web resource which allows access to many of these commentaries. But we'll try and keep this walkthrough simple and not get too sidetracked by more esoteric analysis of the canto. What will become immediately apparent, though not obvious to us in our times, is that it is not written in Latin. At the time, the fact Dante wrote in the common dialect, his Tuscan tongue, was shocking to say the least. Anyone at that time wanting to be taken seriously as an artistic writer, a poet, or just a respected opinion maker would have written their thoughts in Latin. Dante did write many other works and analytical pieces in Latin, but chose the vulgar tongue to write his major work. While Dante was knowledgeable and interested in many things from politics, poetry, art, military matters, astronomy, mathematics, etc., I think one of his pet interests was languages, especially the many dialects of the Italian peninsula. And at this time it's important to remember that Tuscan was just one of these dialects. Just a quick note before we start on why it's called the Commedia. Fictions, or written fictions or stories in that era, were basically of two categories, a tragedia, a tragedy, or a commedia, being that the one, the tragedia, started effectively in happiness and ended in sorrow or worse, while a commedia started in sadness or disharmony and ended happily in contentment with problems resolved. It's as simple as that. The addition of the word divine, as we've come to know the work, didn't occur for several hundred years after Dante, and it was coined by an enterprising printer. Hence, we now know the work as the Divine Comedy. So, in Dante's mind, the name was really quite generic, nearly being in his mind, my work that's not a tragedy and ends well, and that's all the word Commedia means. So, to kick off, here we go. So the canto begins, or the canto, Inferno, and the very Commedia begins with what's regarded as a very famous terzina. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, in the mid-course of our lives, mi ritrovai per una selva oscura, I found myself in a dark wood, che la diretta via era smarrita, as I'd lost sight of the true path. This opening terzina has really become a part of Italian cultural heritage. It's a national treasure in a way. just as much as the Colosseum, Roman Forum, and Michelangelo, Da Vinci's works, the Mona Lisa, etc. I'd imagine that anybody over the age of 12 or 13 would know this this opening to the scena, Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita. It's that famous. So it's a striking start. Of course, it kicks off the action. Well, it kicks off in mid-action. It's very much unlike epic poems that came before. You can think of Virgil's The Aeneid, which was all in Latin, and he starts with Arma virumque cano, I sing of arms and the man. Or Homer starts the Iliad and the Odyssey with exaltation to the muses. But here Dante goes straight into the action. It's a very modern approach. It's something that we probably take for granted now, but at the time would have been quite striking. In many ways, it's not unlike that start to the first Star Wars movie, where, and I'll put the little creeping wording up on the screen on the video version, but you'll remember how in that movie it's straight into the action. There's a little bit of acknowledgement of what's come before, but here we are, and where do we go from here? So he's saying that it's the mid-course of our life. He says, di nostra vita. So just to explain, the lifespan that was assumed in medieval times was around 70 years. So 35 is right in the middle. Now Dante himself was born in 1265. So in 1300, where he's setting the action for the story, he is 35. But by using that word di nostra vita, of our life, it's quite significant because he's roping in humanity, and it's not just himself, not just Dante. He opens the action up to us, the reader, regardless of what epoch we're reading this piece in. It's really a perfect line. You know, he could have said things like "Al metà del cammin della mia vita," you know, at the halfway point of my life, or in the middle of my life, but it's really quite a nice line. The second line says, "Mi ritrovai per una selva oscura." I found myself in a dark wood. For a long time I thought the word ritrovai meant I found myself again, but I've since learned that it's actually, in that era, it actually meant I came to myself, or it became apparent to me. You know, in other words, I fully realised that I was lost. I was in a dark wood. We realise quickly, I guess, that la selva oscura, the dark wood, is really a metaphorical construct. It's an allegory for what we're going to talk about in this opening canto. So really, Dante's saying that in the middle of his life, he's in some sort of deep personal crisis, depression and angst. It tells us that the way forward, the just or right path was what? Well, we don't know. But he's saying, he uses the word smarrita, which is an unusual word, and I think people tend to miss the point. You know, it's a word that means, you know, blurred or fogged out, or not all that foggy. It's not in my consciousness. So in many ways, he's saying that the true path, the way forward, wasn't so much lost, but I'd lost sight of it. It had become lost to me. I've got my own personal story about this particular word in the Commedia. I think if I recall, at about the age of 15, my dad used to, I guess like a lot of Italians, recite those first three lines with a lot of pride in being Italian, and that this was a talisman of Italian culture. But to me, the word that really stuck in my mind was smarrita. Just thought it was such an unusual word, such a nice word. So, you know, over the years, really, that I'd occasionally think of those three lines, but in particular that word, it always sort of struck me as being quite a nice word to have come up with, quite unusual. It wasn't until I got to my 50s and happened across the early talks that Roberto Benigni did to university students in Italy, etc. Really, his infectious enthusiasm and fascination that he had for Dante, really, and my interest in that particular word sparked further interest. In a way, it was like for me that the word smarrita was the seed, and Benigni, when he came along, was the water bearer to give it life. Anyway, that's just a little personal recollection. So Dante, he's not completely lost. He hasn't lost the true path, but he's lost sight of it. I think it's important because he, in a way, is already saying there's always some hope. No matter how desperate things get, there is some hope. That first terzina also sets up the distinction between Dante the writer and Dante the character in the drama, and also we the reader. Really, by the time we get to the end of the 12th line, which we'll work our way to, he's set up an intimate and close attachment between the reader and the action that's going on, and the character within it. We move on. Ai, quanta dir qualere cosa dura, esta selva selvaggia aspra e forta, che nel pensier rinnova la paura. I thought it was to read those three lines as one. So we've had that intro to the scene, and now he's basically saying, oh, how hard it is to describe that wood, so savage, harsh and foreboding. Just to think of it renews in me the fear. Those words describing the woods, esta selva selvaggia aspra forte, these woods so savage, harsh, hard and strong. Such a bitter thought, the thought of that fear really, that death would be better. Tante amare che poche più morte. But now we change gears a bit, and he says, but to show the good I found, I'll tell you of other things I saw. Ma per trattare del ben che ivi trovai, dirò delle altre cose che ivo scorte. That second line, ma per trattare del ben che ivi trovai, is pretty important because, you know, the reading at this point, you're thinking, well, he's found things, so he's obviously writing this story at a point where he's actually been on a journey. You know, are we to believe that he's actually done this? You know, to say that I found the goodness, so it's obviously not all gloom, but he's critically saying, I'm going to relay to you what it was that I found. So here it creates this problem for us where, you know, do we really want to believe that the guy's actually been to these three worlds, or is it an imagined fictional writing? And to some extent, you know, we need to suspend reality and have a degree of credibility in the fact that, okay, he's made this journey and now he's going to tell us about it because he wants to trattare del ben che io vi trovai. He wants to show us some of the good things that he found. It's not all doom and gloom. I can't really tell how I came to be here, so full with sleep at that time when I abandoned the true way. Io non so bene ridir come ivi entrai. Tanto era pien di sonno a quel punto che la verace via abbandonai. That last line is very nice. Che la verace via abbandonai. In a way, to say that I can't recall how I came to be in this state. It's nearly saying that I think, you know, la verace via, I lost the true way. I think I lost it little by little. I can't pick a point where it happened. It just seemed to slip away, and then before I knew it, I'm in this funk. But we move away from just what he's thinking to the place where he is, this metaphorical geography that we're in. But then I reached the foot of a hill where the valley of that wood ended, which had filled my heart with such dread. Ma poi chi fu al piede di un collo giunto, là dove terminava quel valle, che mi aveva di paura il coro compunto. That's quite nice. Il coro compunto really stressed his heart. I looked up and saw its shoulders. Here, the shoulders of the hill we're talking about. Guardai in alto e vidi le sue spalle, already dressed in the sun's rays, that lead others in the straight path wherever they be. Just leaving aside that last line, thinking of the first two. Guardai in alto e vidi le sue spalle, vestite già dai raggi del pianeta. It's quite nice because he humanizes the hill. The hill has got shoulders and it's dressed. It's vestita. The sun's not just shining; it's illuminated by the rays of the planet. So we're talking about the sun's rays here. But in this era, you know, we're pre-Copernicus here. So the sun, you know, the Earth is the centre of everything, and the sun is just another planet revolving around. Even though people realise it was, you know, obviously a critical planet. But nice the way he uses this metaphor of a hill having its shoulders and the shoulders dressed in the sun's rays. And the sun leads all people on the straight path wherever they happen to be. So it's not unique to here. So he gives the sun a bit of a personality that it has this function of illuminating anywhere in the universe or on earth, as it were. And that fear that had touched my heart's core through the evening that I'd spent in such dread now eased a little. Allor fu la paura un poco quieta, eased a bit, che nel lago del cor m'era durata, la notte che passai con tanta pietà. That expression, nel lago del cor, is probably entered colloquial use in a way. The lago del cor, the lake of the heart, the very core, the kernel of the heart, it had hardened, che m'era durata. La notte che passai, the night that I'd passed. But la notte here really signifies a long period. So in a roundabout way, he's saying, you know, seeing the hill, you know, illuminated by the sun's rays, I've got hope, you know, because it's now eased this uncertainty that it had taken. I'd passed through a dark night, which in reality could have been quite a long period for him. And now the first simile of the canto, of the commedia, of which there are, I think, more than 400 similes that Dante uses of varying types. I talked a little bit about them in the Canto 26, the first walkthrough. And here we say, and like one who with panting breath, è come colui con lena affannata, escapes the danger of the waters to the shore, turns and gazes back at those perilous waters. È come qui che con lena affannata, uscito fuori del pelago alla riva. Pelago is the danger, the stormy sea. La riva, the bank. Si volge all'acqua periglioso e guata. Perigoloso, dangerous. So, you know, personal. When I first read this, it really struck me because having been growing up in Sydney near the eastern suburbs of the beaches, I can recall an instance when I was, I don't know, 14 or something like that, being caught in a rip in the surf. You know, they tell you with a rip you don't swim against it, you swim diagonally to not wear yourself out. And with the other dozen or so people, we eventually, you know, swam out into the calmer water and got to the beach shore. And I can distinctly remember just being so stuffed, as it were, from the exertion, and just looking at the water and thinking, my God, you know, that was close. What could have happened? And Dante captures this whole feeling, you know, in this terzina. One with panting, bated breath escapes the dangers of the water and gets to the shore. They turn, and all they do is they look at the perilous waters. Così l'animo mio ch'ancora fuggiva. This was as my mind, so my mind that was still in flight, si volse a retro a rimar lo passo, turned and looked back at the past, where he'd just come from out of the dark woods. That pass che non lascia jamais persona viva, which lets no man escape alive. So that last line, there's always contention about some of these lines, and if you go and look at commentaries, you can read all the history of it, but not worth delving into. But I guess he's saying that selva oscura, that dark wood, is really so, it's like a black hole in a way, you know, like it's not easy to get out of that situation without help, really, without some sort of intervention. When I'd rested my weary body for a while, I started again up the sloping plain, my firm left foot always lower than the other. Poi che ho posato un poco il corpo lasso, the tired body, ripresi via per la piaggia deserta, sì che il pie fermo sempre era il più basso. This last line, they've written heaps around this, and it's a complex line about what does the firm left foot mean. It's got some sort of specific meaning, but I don't think it's worth worrying about. It's a complex line, and we just enjoy it for what it is. So effectively, you know, he's trying now to make his way up towards the hill that we talked about. There's really three distinct parts of the geography here. There's the selva oscuro, there's the hill that is seen bathed in light, and then there's in-between area, the sloping plain, la piaggia deserta, which will be mentioned later on as well. And here, close to where the rise began, e ecco, quasi al cominciare dell'erta, una lonza leggera e presto molto, a leopard, slight and quick, covered in a mottled pelt, chi di pella macolata era coverta. So, a leopard. I had heard that from some of the commentaries or things written at the time, that whilst the Florentines were well aware of lions and tigers, etc., it wasn't until around about this time, and we have to assume that Dante saw it, that an actual leopard was brought to the city, and people actually saw it. So we have this image of the leopard that's very sinuous in the way it moves, and we'll shortly talk about, you know, what is it meant to represent. So this leopard, with its mottled pelt, blocked me head on, impeding me from my intended path, and several times I turned to go back. In Italian, this is a really marvellous terzina with the use of the word volto and volte. E non mi si partia dinanzi al volto, anzi impediva tanto il mio cammino, che fur per ritornar più volte volto. So the first time he uses the word is dinanzi al volto. Volto means like my face. So this thing had it's not allowed, blocking me head on basically. Anzi impediva tanto il mio cammino, so it blocked so much my walk, my way forward. Che I fur per ritornare più volte volto. So I was for turning back more times. So più volte meant more times. Volto, turn your face about. So quite nice the way, you know, he's used that word, really the volto, 3 times in that terzina. And if you hear it read, you know, in nice Italian, it's got a real beautiful musicality to it. It was early morning time. Temp era dal principio del mattino. The sun moving amongst those stars that were with him when his divine love, God, first set those beautiful things in motion. Il sol montava in su con quelle stelle che erano con lui quando l'amore divino mosse le prime quelle cose belle. So that I still hope for the best, despite that beast with its mottled hide. You know, I've often wondered why we've got these, you know, half a dozen or so lines, because it's like a bit of an aside. Like, okay, it was morning time. Talks about how the stars were created. Maybe there's some connection with the fact that the action is being set at dawn, and we're actually the 1st of April 1300, or the beginning of the Easter week, the Easter celebration. So it's a period of renewal. It does strike me as I can't quite understand why this explanation is in here, but anyway, there it is. It does, however, I suppose, express hope, because he goes on to say, so that I still hope for the best, despite the beast with its mottled hide, and encouraged by the hour of the day and the sweet season. But fear struck me again when a lion appeared before me. So here we've got the arrival of the second beast. So I'm saying, sì che a ben sperar m'era cagion di quel fiera alla gaeta pelle. That's the mottled hide. L'ora del tempo è la dolce stagion, ma non sì che paura non mi desse la vista che m'apparava di un leone. He made to come at me with high head and rabid hunger, that he made the very air tremble. It's quite a strong terzina in Italian. Questi parea che contra me venisse, con la testa alta e con rabbiosa fame, you know, famished, angry hunger. Sì che parea che l'aria ne tremessa, so that it seemed that, you know, that the very air was trembling with the actions of the lion. And straight on again to the next terzina. Then a she-wolf, who seemed to carry in her scrawny body all the cravings that have made many people live so miserably. Ed una lupa che di tutte brame sembiava carica nella sua magrezza, e molta gente fece vivere grame. There's some quite strong Italian words there. Sembiava carica nella sua magrezza, che di tutte brame, really expressing the scrawniness of this animal. So here we've got now the arrival finally of the three beasts, which are obviously symbols for something. A lot of debate about what animal symbolises what, but generally we seem to be of the view that the lonza, the leopard, somehow is a symbol for lust, sins of the flesh, as it were, or the weaknesses of the flesh. The lion, pride, and in both cases we go back lust. Dante was a man of the flesh, and I think he considered himself to that was a weakness in his character. The lion, prideful, and definitely Dante had some of that. He wasn't afraid to. He was aware that he had capabilities and was good at what he could do, and so to some extent he suffered from that as well. The wolf, I guess, being the central one, and the cupidicia, or that desire for wanting, that avariceness, greed, etc. And some say maybe the wolf's also a parallel to the Roman Curia, where the Church of Rome had degenerated to, where it had, in a lot of ways, it lost sight of the true message of God, and had become a world unto itself, and full of corruption and much evil. So these three beasts really terrified my spirit so much that with the very sight of her, the last one, the wolf, I lost hope of gaining the heights. Questa mi porsa tanta di gravezza, con la paura che uscì di sua vista, ch'io perdei la speranza dell'altezza. That last line's quite famous now. Ch'io perdei la speranza dell'altezza, that I lost the hope of the height. So he's really thinks, well, this is it. There's a parallel here with the three beasts to, I've heard it said, Jesus, that part where he's in the desert and the devil tempts him. I think the first temptation is something like turn these rocks, or turn this into stone, make these stones bread, and enjoy yourself. And obviously Jesus refuses to do that. And the second one, so that's really parallel with the issues of the flesh. And then, well, you're the Son of God. You can throw yourself down and God will save you. You are who you are. So there's an element of pride there. And again, Jesus refuses that. And lastly, where the devil points out all the wealth and powers of the earth, and all this can be yours. There's the element of greed, and again, Jesus refutes that. And a second, similarly, to describe the feeling, this sunken feeling now where we've lost hope, like one who loves to win. E quale qui che volentieri acquista, who voluntarily acquires. But when the time comes that he loses, e giunge il tempo che perde lo face, is all consumed in tears and sadness, che in tutti I suoi pensieri piange e s'attrista. So this is his feeling. He's feeling so down now that having had a bit of hope of gaining the height, getting out of the dark woods, he's now faced with these three impediments that are blocking his path. So did this pacing beast make me, in approaching me pace by pace. She drove me back to where the sun did not shine, so back into those dark woods. Tal mi fece la bestia senza pace, the beast without peace, that's always on the move. Che venendomi incontro a poco, coming gently. You can just imagine the beast as it's going back and forward and gradually getting closer. Mi ripignava là dove il sole tace. It threw me back. It re-threw me back to where that place where the sun is silent, where the sun doesn't shine. So while I collapsed back to that low place, back into the dark wood, I caught sight of a figure, faint in that long, vast silence. So we're in that area between mount and woods. mentre chi rovinavi in basso loco. Dinanzi agli occhi mi si fu offerto, chi per lungo silenzio parea fuoco. So he's mentre chi rovinai in basso loco means low place. Dinanzi agli occhi, dinanzi, next to my eyes, appearing next to my eyes, was offered, a sight was offered. Chi per lungo silenzio parea fuoco. So fuoco is faint, or a figure faint. So this lungo silenzio, again, a lot's been written about that, which, to be frank, I don't fully understand, and I don't know that it's worth going into, but it has some sort of significance, this long silence. I think we can take it to mean in that dead zone between the dark woods and the illuminated hill. So somewhere there he sees in the distance a faint figure, and we'll see who this is. When I saw him in that vast plain, have mercy on me, I cried, whoever you are, be it spirit or living man. Quando vidi costui nel gran deserto, in that vast plain, miserere di me, oh, have pity on me, gridai a lui, I cried to him. Qual che tu si, od ombra, od homo certo, whatever you are, either shade or homo certo, or a certain man. And that marvellous reply. Risposibi, non homo già fui. He replied, I'm not a man, but I once was. E li parenti miei furono Lombardi, and my parents were Lombards, that come from Lombardy. Mantovani per ambedui. Mantua was their homeland. The shade, or the newly appeared character, goes on to explain. Nacqui sub Iulio, ancor che fosse tardi. I was born late in the time of Julius, being Julius Caesar. E vissi a Roma, and I lived in Rome, sotto il buon Augusto, under good Augustus, Caesar Augustus, nel tempo delle idee false e bugiardi, in the time of false and lying gods. So whoever this person is, they lived through that period of Caesar Augustus, and the idei falsi bugiardi is obviously the pagan gods living in the pre-Christian era. I was a poet, poeta fui, et cantai di quel giusto figliol d'Anchise, and I sang of that just son of Anchise, who came from Troy, che vien de Troia, poi che il superbo Ilion fu combusto, who came from Troy after proud Ilium was torched, was burnt to the ground. So we can guess from this introduction that the person whose parents were Lombards, from Mantua, lived around the time of the great of Caesar Augustus, who was a poet, and he sang of that just son of Anchise, who's Aeneas, who'd come from Troy after Troy had been destroyed by the Greeks in the Trojan Wars. So this is obviously Virgil, who'd written of that the Aeneid, charting the story of the son of Aeneas in his journey from Troy to the founding of Rome. But you, why return to such an unhappy state? Why are you turning back? Ma tu, perché ritorni a tanto noia here meaning angst and unhappiness? Perché non sali il dilettoso monte? Why don't you climb that most delightful mount, that lovely mount? The beginning, that mountain which is the beginning of and cause of all joy. Che principio e cagion di tutta gioia. So he's asking, well, why are you turning back? Dante's obviously in some shock. He says, are you then that Virgil? Or sei tu quel Virgilio? E quel fonte che spande di parlarsi largo fiume? Are you then that Virgil, fount, that spreads forth a whole stream of speech? Risposi io lui con vergognosa fronte. I replied with a shamed face bent low. So Dante recognises him straight away from the preamble, and it's if I ever wanted anybody to come and help me, well this is the guy. Or tu sei quel Virgilio, It's a lovely speech. You know, that font of words that you created, that spread like a stream. But he's quite respectful, con vergognoso fronte, with a shamed front, and goes on to say, "Oh, the glory and light of other poets, let the long study and great love that led me to your works assist me now. Ora degli altri poeti onore e lume, vagliami il lungo studio, il grande amor, che m'ha fatto cercar lo tuo volume." It's quite a nice terzina, that. But it's a piece of recognition and honour to Virgil, who Dante would have known the Aeneid, a lot of it by heart. He absolutely. And when you actually listen to the Aeneid, I've never read it, obviously not in Latin and not in English, but I have listened to a full CD spoken record type recording with Simon Calway, I think his name, and it's quite interesting when you come upon parts of the Aeneid that are direct reflections into the Commedia, particularly in the Inferno. There are pieces that really ring a bell. So he obviously knew this work and studied the style with great interest, and it helped forge his own style of writing, and leaving nothing to doubt whatsoever. You are my teacher and my author. Tu sei il mio maestro, il mio autore. You are the sole one from whom I learnt the great style that has given me such honour. He's not backward in coming forward, Dante. Tu sei solo colui da cui io tolsi lo bel stilo, the bello stilo, che m'ha fatto onore. So, whether the bello stilo is what people refer to in terms of Dante's writing at the time, il bel stile nuovo, the new beautiful style, I think it's just more generic here, that he's really saying you're the one I really learnt from. You taught me. You are my preferred author, el mio autore. So he's just definitely doesn't leave anything to doubt. Goes on to say, see the beast that makes me turn away. Vedi la bestia per cui io mi volsi. Aiutami di lei, famoso saggio. Help me, save me from her, famous sage. Che, and the famous line here, che ella mi fa tremare le vene e pulsi. That she makes my veins and pulses tremble. This is a line that's definitely entered general Italian colloquial use, and people use it frequently, and today for certain. Tremare le vene e pulsi, to tremble the veins and pulses. So he's saying, Virgil, see the beast that is, or there are more than one beast, but really I guess we're referring to the wolf now. Help me, famous sage. She makes my very veins and pulses tremble. And Virgil goes on to reply, but look, and before we go into it, let there be no doubt that really Dante here is very afraid. He's not, it's not a joke for him. He's, because in that second line we're about to read, poiché lagrimar mi vide, because Virgil's seeing him basically crying with fear. You'll need to follow another path, he replied, seeing me crying, if you want to survive from this wild place. A te convien tener altro viaggio, risposi. You'll need to take another path, he replied. Poiché lagrimare mi vide, because he saw me crying. Se vuoi campare d'este loco selvaggio. We've had that word selvaggio a few times. It's wild, lonely place. If you want to survive this place, you'll have to take another path. And with these next two terzine, Virgil describes the nature of the beast. Actually with the next couple, three or so terzinas. This beast, which you're crying at, he lets none pass. She so besets them and slays them. Che questa bestia, per la qual tu gride, non lascia altrui passar per la sua via, ma tanto l'impedisce che l'uccide. So that this beast doesn't let people pass. It so gets into them and so impedes them, so it gets into their head in a way that they basically die. ha natura si malvagia e ria. She's got a nature. Her nature is so evil and horrendous, cruel. Che mai non empia la bremosa voglia. E dopo il pasto ha più fame che pria. Very famous line again, that last one. So the nature of this beast is evil and cruel. That her greedy hunger is never satisfied. That e dopo il pasto ha più fame che pria. And after the feast and after the eating has more hunger than before. So it's got a hunger that can never be satisfied. So we're starting to get the understanding that this animal and symbolically representing greed and avarice is really touches a vein with our lives today or all through history. That after eating, it's hungrier than before. You can just see that situation where the more you have, the more you want. Nothing ever satisfies your desire. And I think, we probably all suffer from this particular issue, and much more so now than in Dante's day, when now we're in such a consumer-oriented society that you may have a lovely car and a lovely house, but you want more and more, and enough is never enough. E dopo il pasto ha più fame che pria, più fame che pria. And now we have a final characteristic or another characteristic of the animal, followed by something of a prophecy. There are many animals that she couples with. Molti sono gli animali a cui s'ammoglia. Moglia being the word for wife. So ammoglia is to wife with or to couple with. E più saranno ancora, and there'll be many more to come. In fin, and now the prophecy, until that hound appears that will make her die in pain. Il veltro is like a hunting dog, a fast hunting dog, probably something like a whippet or a greyhound, probably a whippet, I think. Molti sono gli animali a cui s'ammoglia, e più saranno ancora, infin che il veltro verrà, until the whippet will come, the hunting dog will come, che la farà morire con doglia, that'll make her die in pain. So Virgil's prophesying that this, or saying initially, that this characteristic of envy and greed couples with lots of other characteristics. So it might join up, it might couple with lust, it might couple with the love of food, and you get greed and overeating and all that. It might couple with desire for power, and you'll get traitorous activities, etc. So that it's quite nice when you think about it that you've got an underlying bedrock capability, or not capability but characteristic, that when joined with other characteristics creates a different outcome. So that's essentially what he's saying, but then goes on to say there will come somebody. He uses the characteristic of a hunting dog, a fast active hunting dog that will actually destroy this thing. We know from a lot of Dante's writing that he was very, very concerned about the lack of direction, but temporal, from a monarch in the Italian peninsula, but also, in terms of the church activities. So here he's saying through Virgil's voice that, we've got all these things going on that are not nice, but something will come. And quite specifically, a ruler, an emperor from some part of Europe will come and sort things out in Italy, because remember, we talked about in the very first walkthrough that one of Dante's great worries and sadnesses was all the sectarian, all the arguing, fighting, and quite deadly activities going on between the city-states in Italy, and it needed someone to take control and exert authority. He a lot of his view, he has a very, very respectful and marvellous view of the Roman Empire. He hasn't been through the Hollywood years like we have and seen the interpretation of Rome that we put on it, several thousand years later. He can look back at the Roman era and see that it was a period when law ruled, when Rome, exerted authority, and you know, yes, it conquered lands and all that, but it actually brought civilization both to the Italian peninsula and to other parts of the world. So whenever we allude to Rome through, he often uses the allegory of the eagle, it's in Dante's mind a very, very positive thing, because he can only perceive, or his perception of the Roman era is one of great advancement and stability for Italy, and not the sort of Hollywood vision that we've seen or we've been fed on. So this Veltro, this being to come, shall feed on neither land or wealth. Questi non ciberà terra ne peltro. Peltro being, you know, like pelt or wealth or something of value. But ma sapienza, amore e virtute. But this being to come will feed on knowledge, love and virtue. E sua nazione sarà tra feltro e feltro, and his birth will be between felt and felt. Quite a bit of a difficult one to comprehend, though. But felt, I think the concept here is that this being will be of low birth, will come from you know, modest means, modest origins. And he goes on to use not so much a simile but a reference to really four characters that were part of the founding of Rome in the period with Aeneid, in the Aeneid, and Aeneas, and two are on the losing side, or with the Latins, and two were on Aeneas's side. So, but he treats them both the same. He treats all four of them in the same pot as, you know, he will make well. In other words, he will heal low-lying Italy. And there's sort of like two meanings to umila Italia, low-lying, could mean humbled as well. You know, for the creation of whom died la Vergine Camilla, per cui morir la Vergine Camilla, Urialo e Turno e Niso di Ferute. They all died of their wounds. So Camilla and Turnus were, I guess, on the side of the Latins being the dominant tribe when Aeneas came to Rome, and the other two, Urialus and Niso, were part of Aeneas's, you know, people. So whilst they were on opposing sides, they all were instrumental in effectively forging the new Italy. So this thing to come will hunt the beast through every village till he's driven her back to hell, where primal envy first let her loose. Questi la caccerà per ogni villa. It'll chase it from every town, city, village. Finché l'avrà rimesso nell'inferno, till it'll re-put it into hell. L'onde invidia prima di partirla, where primal envy first set her loose. So there's something here of an allegory, if you like, of the fallen angels, those angels that fell from God's grace, you know, created hell, as it were, Lucifer and all that, who threw out of their depths these evils. Because they could not have the love of God, they threw the evils out. And in a way, Virgil's saying that this personage to come will hunt, you know, evils throughout the land and cast them back from their primal origin back into hell. So having said all that, Virgil says, really, I think I surmise that for your betterment, ond io per lo tuo me penso e discerno, lo tuo me, migliore, it's like the word meglio is better in Italian, but he's sort of truncated it here. So I think for your betterment, you should follow me. E tu mi segui, that you follow me. E io sarò tua guida, and I'll be your guide. E traorti di qui per loco interno, and I'll lead you from this place here to other eternal places, where you'll hear desperate screams. You'll see ancient souls in pain as each wails of its second death, which is really the final judgment. Ove udrai le disperate stride, the desperate screams. Vedrai l'antichi spiriti dolenti, you'll see the ancient spirits saddened or in pain. Che alla seconda morte ciascun grida, that to the second death each cries. So you can imagine the shock of reading this in the 1300s, where someone's got the gall to, be writing a piece about, the second judgment, seeing people in hell, and as we go on to say, and you'll see those content in the flames, because they hope to come, whenever it happens, amid the blessed people. E vedrai coloro che son contenti, and you'll see those who are happy nel fuoco, in the fire, perché speran di venire, because they hope to come, quando che sia alla beata gente, when it is with the beautiful people, the blessed people. So he's saying here, we'll also go to purgatory. We'll go to that world where people are happy in the flames because they know they've made it. They may have to spend the time, but they know that they will eventually be with the blessed people, le beate gente. Now, purgatory, you need to remember, was an invention of the church. It didn't exist. It was only relatively new in the 1300s. In a way, I think it arose out of people's desperation that with only the concept of heaven and hell, it would seem very easy to end up, falling into hell, because there was nothing in between. So if you happened to be caught, out of confession or in some state, that was it. You didn't have an option. So effectively, the church invented this concept of purgatory, a place in between where you could, for non, super critical sins and whatever, you could work off some time. And it's really Dante in writing the Commedia, and particularly the Purgatorio, but the whole concept that popularizes the concept of purgatory. He's really the first person to imagine and to give it some substance, because the church saw it really in reality as a money-making opportunity, because the indulgences and the things that they had in place which allowed people to buy their way, or to in terms of having prayers and masses said for relatives who were in this fictitious purgatory. The church did very well out of the whole idea, but it was Dante who, in a way, popularized it and made people feel some level of comfort with what the Purgatorio was all about. And when and if we ever get to doing walkthroughs there, we'll see that the mood, the atmosphere is completely different to the Inferno. I think it was Dorothy L. Sayre, one of the commentators, but also a British crime writer, novelist, once said, a great lover of Dante, said it's reading only the Inferno is like going to Paris and only visiting the sewers. You actually need to do a little bit more to see the beauty and the comfort that's there. And the mood when you read the Purgatorio is completely different to the Inferno, and hopefully we'll get there one day. And Virgil goes on to allude to the Paradiso now, and he says, to those, because we talked about the blessed people, line 120, to those, if you wish to ascend, there will be a soul more fit than I. So, alle quae poi, se tu vorrai salire, if you will want to ascend, anima fia, a being will be, a più me degna, it will be more deserving than me, with whom I will leave you when I depart. Con lei ti lascerò nel mio partire. So I'll leave you with her when I depart. So here we're referring to Beatrice, who is the personage who effectively takes over from Virgil up in the higher reaches of the Purgatorio to be Dante's guide, and it's quite a sad departure, when Dante turns around and finds that Virgil is no longer there. It's really a very touching scene, and Virgil goes on to explain why that's the case. That he'll have to hand the baton over to that anima fia, that other soul who's more fit than I. Che quello imperatore che lassù regna, because the king, the emperor who reigns there above, perché I fu ribellente alle sue leggi, because I rebelled against his laws, non vol che in sua città per me si venga, does not wish me to enter his kingdom. This is a pretty staggering statement. So we've got Virgil, who's going to quite lovingly and carefully, accompany Dante through this voyage and really vast part of the journey, he's not going to get to be saved. And he's saying, you know, because I rebelled against his laws, I don't quite follow that to some extent. But he was born pre-Christianity, so he was effectively a pagan, and he's not. He's saying, you know, that God does not want me in His kingdom. But he seems to be quite you know, phlegmatic or philosophical about it. But that's the reason he'll be handing over. And he's saying, in all places he reigns, and there he rules, there in his city and his high seat. Happy is he who he elects to be there. In tutte parte impere quivi regna. So in all places he reigns, and there he rules. Quivi è la sua città e l'alto seggio. That's his city and his high seat. And happy is he, e felice colui quivi elegge, who he elects. Right? And I to him. Right, so Dante replies, Poet, I beg you, by that very God that you did not know, that I could flee this evil or worse, you know, that you lead me to the places that you just described. E io a lui, and I to him. Poeta, he calls him. Like he's a fellow poet. So there's this bonding based around their poetic activities. Io ti richeggio per quello Dio che tu non conoscesti. Accio che io fuggia questo male e peggio, that I flee this male, this badness and worse, you know. So I'm begging you to help me do this. Che tu mi meni là dove or diceste, that you meni me, you conduct me to there where you just described. Sì che io veggio la porta di San Pietro, that I might see St. Peter's gate. So there's this sense here of having a bit of courage. So whilst we know that Dante is quite fearful, he seems to be girding himself to, you know, he's saying, you know, that you lead me to this place that I might see St. Peter's gates. And also all those that you tell me are so unhappy. So these are obviously the people in the Inferno. E color cui tu fai cotanto mesti. So it's not just to see St. Peter's gates, but also what we see before that. And the final closing line is quite a gentle closing piece. Allora si mosse, and so he moved. E io li tieni dietro, and I came on after him. And that closes the canto. Well, that's our first canto of the Inferno. There's probably not an awful lot to discuss. We'll go through a couple of things. It really outlines Dante's situation. This coming from a feeling of depression, having lost what he calls the true path, the way forward, which would have really been in that era the Christian ethic. But I think it could also be applied to concept of just a general humanistic view to life, or even to how the Buddhists view life in terms of seeking the right way and being wary of the distractions of life, as it were. Should, you know, go via the 8 noble paths, etc. It also introduces Virgil to the action, so we know that Virgil and Dante have a very special relationship, become, you know, quite close. It's unique in literature, and it's very touching and human in the way it's developed in its intensity. The three weaknesses, or the three areas of all types of sin, if you like, that are proposed through the three beasts, exactly mirror the construction of the imagined Inferno. So when, you know, if we looked at the previous walkthrough, there was a diagram of the Inferno, but just to recap, it's essentially a conical construct that goes progressively down and the circumferences get smaller as you go down. In the upper levels, we've got the circles that are called that really relate to incontinence, sins of incontinence, things like lust and gluttony and the like, you know, sins of the flesh, which are probably not as serious. And in the central area, we've got sins of aggression and pride, and where people, you know, face off against God in terms of, you know, their belief in themselves and what the impediments God's putting in their way. But the lower levels, where a lot of the time in the Inferno is devoted to really relate to fraud and deceit, which I think most parallel the she-wolf or the wolf that's represented in the first canto. But there's that element of hope that, you know, we haven't completely lost the way. We've lost sight of it, but, you know, it can be found again, and with the right help and intervention, we'll get there. And really the fact that it's clear that this is somebody writing on the return of a journey. So they've been somewhere, they've come back, they've now sat down to write about the whole experience. So in that case, it's quite unique. But it sets us up for the journey. I'd have to say it's not one of my favourite cantos, but it's a necessary one because it leads into the action of subsequent episodes of the whole work. We don't meet too many people other than Virgil, whereas as we proceed, we have a lot of interesting encounters with different characters that represent, you know, different activities within the Commedia. So I hope you've gained something out of this walkthrough of Canto 1, and as ever, if you've got any comments, just leave them in the YouTube comment fields, and we'll see you again hopefully. This walkthrough conducted on 7th September 2017. Greg Naimo. See you again. Bye.